It began with a sealed directive that few people inside Sandringham ever expected to see. One signature, one decree, and suddenly, decades of quiet assumptions were shattered. What happened behind palace doors left Camilla's inner circle stunned and left her son facing a reality he never imagined possible. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. For years, Sandringham had existed as more than a royal estate. It was a symbol of continuity, a place where traditions survived political storms, family disagreements, and the relentless pressure of modern royal life. Those who worked closest to the institution understood that decisions involving Sandringham were rarely made lightly. That is why whispers began spreading almost immediately when Princess Anne was unexpectedly summoned to a confidential meeting involving some of the monarchy's most trusted advisors. The gathering was not listed on public schedules. No official statement followed. Yet the unusual secrecy surrounding it sparked immediate speculation among those familiar with the inner workings of the royal household. According to palace insiders, concerns had been quietly building regarding the future management of the estate. What began as routine discussions reportedly evolved into something far more serious. Questions were being asked behind closed doors. Long-standing arrangements were suddenly being reviewed. Individuals who had spent years believing certain understandings were secure found themselves facing growing uncertainty. The atmosphere surrounding Sandringham became increasingly tense as rumors circulated that King Charles had authorized an emergency governance review unlike anything seen in recent years. The significance of such a move was impossible to ignore. Reviews of this nature were not launched without cause. They required legal examination, administrative oversight, and careful consideration of consequences that could affect the monarchy for years to come. Soon, palace staff began noticing unusual activity involving estate records. Legal advisors were reportedly entering meetings with increasing frequency. Historical documents were being revisited. Governance structures that had remained largely untouched for years were suddenly under renewed scrutiny. Each development added another layer of mystery to an already unfolding royal drama. What made the situation even more explosive was the apparent lack of warning given to those closest to Camilla's circle. Reports suggest that members of her family were caught completely off guard by the speed and seriousness of the developments. Assumptions that had once seemed unshakable suddenly appeared vulnerable. Confidence gave way to concern. Concerns slowly transformed into anxiety. And at the center of it all stood Princess Anne, a figure long respected for her unwavering devotion to duty and her willingness to make difficult decisions when the future of the institution appeared at stake. As Anne began examining long-standing authority structures connected to Sandringham, she reportedly uncovered questions that reached far beyond simple estate management. Hidden beneath years of tradition were issues that some believed had never been fully addressed. The deeper the review went, the more apparent it became that this was not merely an administrative exercise. Something larger was unfolding, something capable of reshaping relationships, expectations, and influence within royal circles. And as the first pieces of the puzzle began falling into place, few could have anticipated just how far the consequences would reach. But the order Anne received was far more significant than anyone realized, and its origins stretched back years. Sandringham was never just another royal residence. Hidden behind its gates was a symbol of continuity, inheritance, and royal authority. Whoever controlled its future held influence extending far beyond its fields and halls, and that was exactly why tensions were beginning to rise. Long before the current controversy began to unfold, Sandringham occupied a unique place within the royal story. Unlike many properties associated with the crown, it carried a deeply personal significance for generations of monarchs. It was a place where private traditions were preserved, where family milestones quietly unfolded, and where some of the most important decisions in modern royal history were contemplated far from public scrutiny. For decades, Sandringham represented stability. While governments changed, public opinion shifted, and royal scandals came and went, The estate remained a constant reminder of continuity between one generation and the next. That enduring connection made the growing uncertainty surrounding its future all the more alarming. Those familiar with royal history understood that Sandringham was not simply measured in acres or buildings. Its true value rested in what it symbolized. It represented legacy. It represented stewardship. Most importantly, it represented the responsibility of preserving something greater than any one individual. Every monarch who passed through its gates inherited not ownership, but guardianship. That distinction had guided royal thinking for generations, and many believed it should continue to do so long into the future. Yet as Princess Anne's review expanded, concerns began emerging about whether that traditional understanding was being challenged. Quiet discussions reportedly raised questions about influence, authority, and who would ultimately shape the estate's future direction. While no public dispute had yet surfaced, insiders suggested that unease was spreading among those tasked with protecting long-established royal traditions. What had once seemed secure suddenly appeared vulnerable to competing visions and competing interests. The deeper Anne examined the estate's historical framework, the more she found herself revisiting principles that had guided the monarchy for decades. Few members of the royal family possessed a stronger appreciation for institutional continuity than Anne. Throughout her life, she had earned a reputation for placing duty above personal comfort, responsibility above popularity, and service above recognition. Those qualities had made her one of the monarchy's most trusted figures. They also made her uniquely suited to confront questions that others might prefer to avoid. As records were reviewed and historical precedents studied, a troubling possibility reportedly began to emerge. Decisions made years earlier, perhaps even decades earlier, were now intersecting with present-day realities in ways few had anticipated. What appeared straightforward on the surface concealed layers of complexity beneath. Each answer seemed to produce new questions. Each discovery pointed toward deeper concerns. The process was no longer simply about preserving a cherished estate. It was becoming a wider examination of how royal legacy itself should be protected during a period of uncertainty. Meanwhile, those observing events from the sidelines sensed that something significant was unfolding. Conversations grew quieter. Speculation intensified. Individuals who once felt confident about the future reportedly became increasingly nervous as Anne's review continued gathering momentum. The stakes were rising, and with every passing day, it became clearer that the questions surrounding Sandringham extended far beyond property management. They touched the very heart of inheritance, influence, and royal responsibility. And as Anne continued following the trail left behind by years of decisions and assumptions, she reportedly encountered information that transformed concern into alarm, setting the stage for a confrontation few within royal circles were prepared to face. As Anne dug deeper into the estate's future, she reportedly uncovered concerns that would change everything. At first, the disagreements seemed minor. Different visions, different priorities. But insiders claim the divide surrounding Sandringham had quietly been growing for months, creating tensions that were impossible to ignore any longer. What Princess Anne reportedly uncovered during her review did not emerge overnight. The seeds of conflict had been planted long before formal concerns reached the highest levels of the royal household. On the surface, everyone appeared committed to the same goal: protecting Sandringham's future. Yet, beneath that shared objective existed profoundly different ideas about what protection actually meant. Some believed the estate should remain governed strictly according to long-established royal traditions, preserving every principle that previous generations had fought to maintain. Others reportedly favored a more flexible approach, one that could reshape influence and authority in ways that some traditionalists viewed with deep suspicion. At first, these competing perspectives confined to private conversations. Courteous disagreements were exchanged behind closed doors. Suggestions were debated, proposals were reviewed. Yet as months passed, what began as routine discussions slowly evolved into something far more serious. Individuals who once worked comfortably alongside one another reportedly found themselves drifting toward opposing camps. Old alliances started shifting. New loyalties emerged. Conversations became more cautious. Trust became harder to maintain. For Princess Anne, the growing tension represented more than a disagreement about administration. It touched on principles she had spent her entire life defending. Few members of the royal family carried a stronger reputation for safeguarding tradition. Throughout decades of public service, Anne had repeatedly demonstrated that preserving institutional stability mattered more to her than personal popularity or convenience. As a result, reports suggest she became increasingly concerned as questions surrounding Sandringham's future grew more complex and more politically sensitive. Meanwhile, uncertainty surrounding future access and authority began fueling speculation across royal circles. Who would influence key decisions moving forward? Who would hold responsibility for protecting the estate's long-term interests? And perhaps most importantly, who would ultimately shape the legacy left behind for future generations? These questions lingered unanswered, creating an atmosphere of growing unease. Every discussion seemed to generate additional concerns rather than solutions. Those closest to the situation reportedly noticed the change almost immediately. Meetings became more frequent. Reviews expanded. Advisors who previously played limited roles suddenly found themselves deeply involved in ongoing consultations. Some insiders claimed that discussions were no longer focused solely on the estate itself. Instead, they had evolved into a wider debate about influence, responsibility, and the future direction of royal stewardship. The stakes were becoming impossible to ignore. As Anne's involvement deepened, so did the seriousness of the investigation. Information from multiple sources was reportedly being compared. Historical precedents were revisited. Existing arrangements faced renewed scrutiny. The deeper officials looked, the more apparent it became that simple compromises might no longer be possible. What had started as a quiet disagreement was gradually transforming into a struggle over competing visions for the future. And while most of these developments remained hidden from public view, the consequences were beginning to ripple through palace networks. Individuals who once felt secure reportedly grew anxious. Long-standing assumptions were challenged. Expectations that had remained untouched for years suddenly appeared vulnerable. The atmosphere surrounding Sandringham became increasingly charged with uncertainty as everyone waited to see whether the growing divide could still be contained. But as tensions continued building behind closed doors, events were moving toward a point from which there would be no easy return. Decisions would soon have to be made. Positions would soon have to be chosen. And one pivotal development was about to force private disagreements into the open, changing the course of the entire conflict. Then came the moment that transformed private concerns into official action. When Princess Anne finally moved, she moved with the precision that has defined her entire royal career. There were no public speeches, no dramatic announcements, just a series of decisions that instantly altered the balance of power. For months, uncertainty had spread quietly through royal circles. Questions lingered unanswered. Tensions simmered beneath carefully maintained appearances. But now the period of observation was ending. The concerns that had once existed only in private discussions were being transformed into formal action. According to insiders, Princess Anne initiated a comprehensive review process designed to examine every aspect of Sandringham's governance structure. What began as an inquiry was rapidly evolving into something far more significant, a deliberate effort to determine who should ultimately safeguard one of the monarchy's most important legacies. The impact was immediate. Individuals who had grown comfortable with existing arrangements reportedly found themselves facing unexpected scrutiny. Long-standing assumptions were no longer accepted without question. Procedures that had remained largely untouched for years were reopened for examination. Every decision, every authority structure, every layer of responsibility connected to the estate suddenly came under renewed review. For some, it represented accountability. For others, it felt like a direct challenge to their influence. Behind closed doors, new governance measures were reportedly introduced with remarkable speed. Legal frameworks were reassessed. Administrative responsibilities were clarified. Existing chains of authority underwent careful examination. The objective, according to those familiar with the process, was not merely to resolve immediate concerns, but to establish protections that would endure far into the future. Anne was reportedly determined to ensure that Sandringham remained guided by principles of stewardship rather than personal interests. As the review intensified, legal advisors became increasingly involved. Their presence alone signaled the seriousness of what was unfolding. Lawyers, estate specialists, and trusted royal officials were reportedly consulted as discussions expanded beyond routine management questions. Historical precedents were revisited. Existing agreements were evaluated. Potential vulnerabilities were identified and analyzed. The process became increasingly methodical, leaving little room for uncertainty. Anne's reputation for thoroughness was once again proving impossible to ignore. Meanwhile, implementation quietly began. Royal officials responsible for estate oversight reportedly started introducing procedural changes designed to reinforce accountability. Administrative responsibilities were adjusted. Reporting structures evolved. Oversight mechanisms were strengthened. None of these developments attracted public attention at the time. Yet together they represented a profound shift in how authority surrounding Sandringham would be exercised moving forward. The reaction from various factions inside royal circles was swift. Some welcomed the changes as necessary safeguards for the future. Others reportedly viewed them with growing alarm. Individuals who had expected continuity suddenly found themselves confronting an entirely different reality. Among those most surprised were figures connected to Camilla's broader circle of influence. Reports suggest several allies were caught completely off guard by both the scope and speed of Anne's actions. What many assumed would remain a quiet internal discussion had transformed into a decisive restructuring effort with potentially far-reaching consequences. Yet perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Anne's intervention was the confidence with which it was executed. There was no hesitation, no indication of uncertainty. Every step appeared calculated toward a larger objective that only a small number of insiders fully understood. The review was no longer about isolated concerns. It had become part of a broader effort to secure Sandringham's future and protect its role within the monarchy for generations to come. Still, as significant as these changes were, an even more dramatic consequence was quietly approaching. Because hidden within the restructuring process was a development that no one had anticipated, one that would soon place an unexpected individual at the center of the unfolding controversy and send shockwaves through royal circles. But one consequence of Anne's actions would leave an unexpected figure completely speechless. No one expected the fallout to reach this far. Yet as the details became clearer, attention turned toward Camilla's son, whose expectations regarding influence and access suddenly appeared to collide with an entirely different royal reality. Until this point, much of the discussion surrounding Sandringham had focused on governance, stewardship, and institutional responsibility. But as Princess Anne's review continued producing consequences, the human dimension of the conflict became impossible to ignore. What had started as an examination of authority structures was now affecting individuals who believed their positions within royal circles were secure. Among those reportedly feeling the impact most acutely was Camilla's son, who suddenly found himself at the center of growing speculation about what the future might hold. For years, assumptions had quietly shaped expectations. Certain understandings existed without ever needing to be spoken aloud. Relationships, access, and influence often relied as much on perception as on formal authority. That delicate balance had remained largely undisturbed. Yet Anne's actions were forcing long-standing assumptions into the open, where they could finally be examined. And once questions began being asked, answers followed that many had never expected to hear. Reports suggest that privileges and expectations connected to estate access were being reassessed as part of the broader review. While no dramatic public announcements accompanied these discussions, their implications were profound. Individuals who once believed certain opportunities would naturally remain available reportedly found themselves confronting a far more uncertain future. The rules appeared to be changing. More importantly, the standards governing those rules appeared to be tightening. Within royal social circles, reactions spread rapidly. Conversations that had once centered on speculation now revolved around consequences. Some observers viewed the developments as a necessary correction designed to preserve institutional integrity. Others privately worried about the wider implications. Regardless of where opinions fell, few could deny that Princess Anne's determination was becoming increasingly clear. This was not a temporary review. It was not a symbolic gesture. It was a sustained effort aimed at redefining expectations surrounding one of the monarchy's most important estates. That realization reportedly sent shockwaves through networks that extended well beyond Sandringham itself. Friends, advisors, and longtime associates suddenly found themselves re-evaluating assumptions they had taken for granted. Every new development seemed to reinforce the same message. The old certainties were disappearing. The structures that once appeared permanent were proving more fragile than many had imagined. And at the center of it all stood Anne, unwavering in her belief that the institution's future required difficult decisions in the present. For Camilla's broader family circle, the emotional impact was reportedly impossible to ignore. Expectations built over years were now colliding with a reality shaped by formal reviews, legal scrutiny, and institutional priorities. What made the situation particularly dramatic was the contrast between confidence and uncertainty. Only months earlier, many had assumed the future was predictable. Now those assumptions were being challenged one by one, creating a sense of instability that few had anticipated. As word of these developments continued spreading through palace networks, the atmosphere became increasingly charged. Every conversation seemed to produce new theories. Every adjustment sparked fresh speculation. Yet, despite the growing reactions, one crucial question remained unresolved. The review had altered expectations. It had reshaped relationships. It had changed the balance of influence. But the most important decision of all had yet to be revealed. Because while everyone was focused on the immediate consequences, attention was gradually shifting toward a far larger issue, one that only King Charles himself could ultimately resolve, and whose answer would determine the final direction of the entire conflict. And while reactions continued to spread, an even bigger question remained unanswered. Caught between loyalty and duty, King Charles found himself facing a decision that would define the future direction of the monarchy. Whatever choice he made would inevitably leave someone disappointed. As the consequences of Princess Anne's review continued unfolding, attention increasingly shifted toward the one person whose judgment could ultimately settle the growing uncertainty. King Charles had spent much of his reign balancing competing responsibilities, navigating personal relationships while carrying the immense weight of institutional duty. But this situation presented a uniquely difficult challenge. It was no longer simply a matter of estate management or administrative reform. The questions surrounding Sandringham had evolved into something far more sensitive, forcing Charles to weigh personal loyalties against the long-term interests of the monarchy itself. Those close to royal circles reportedly described a period of intense consultation. Advisors were said to be examining every possible implication of the decisions now facing the king. Conversations extended beyond practical concerns and into matters of legacy, stewardship, and historical responsibility. Every option appeared to carry consequences. Every path forward seemed certain to create disappointment somewhere within the wider royal family. Yet, delaying a decision was becoming increasingly difficult as tensions continued building around him. The pressure came from multiple directions. Traditionalists reportedly argued that preserving established principles must remain the highest priority. Others believed that flexibility and accommodation were necessary to maintain harmony within the family. Both sides presented persuasive arguments. Both claimed to be acting in the institution's best interests. Yet as discussions continued, one reality became impossible to ignore. The uncertainty itself was becoming a problem. The longer questions remained unanswered, the more speculation and anxiety spread throughout royal circles. At the heart of every conversation stood the issue of legacy. Sandringham represented more than land, buildings, or authority structures. It symbolized continuity between generations. It embodied the idea that each monarch inherited a responsibility to protect something greater than themselves. For Charles, that principle reportedly carried enormous significance. Having spent a lifetime preparing for kingship, he understood the delicate balance between personal affection and institutional obligation better than most. The decision before him demanded that balance in its purest form. Meanwhile, Princess Anne's influence continued growing. The deeper officials examined the review's findings. The more difficult it became to dismiss the concerns she had raised. Her reputation for diligence, discipline, and unwavering commitment to duty gave additional weight to her recommendations. What began as a review had evolved into a broader conversation about safeguarding royal traditions during a period of uncertainty. And with every passing week, more voices reportedly aligned themselves with Anne's vision for the estate's future. Eventually, the process moved toward its final stage. Reports suggest that a series of crucial consultations took place involving senior advisors, legal experts, and trusted royal figures. The atmosphere surrounding these discussions was said to be unusually serious. Everyone understood the significance of the moment. The outcome would not simply influence Sandringham's future. It would establish a precedent for how questions of stewardship and authority would be approached moving forward. Then, slowly but unmistakably, a decisive path began to emerge. The uncertainty that had defined previous months started giving way to clarity. Rumors intensified. Expectations shifted. Individuals on every side of the issue sensed that a conclusion was approaching. The waiting period was ending, and with it came the realization that not everyone would welcome what happened next. Because once the king finally reached his decision, there would be no returning to old assumptions, no restoring the balance that had existed before the review began. The future was about to take shape in a way few had predicted when this story first started. Once the king's position became clear, the outcome was impossible to reverse. The decree arrived quietly, but its impact was thunderous. In a matter of moments, years of speculation, uncertainty, and internal tension were replaced by a single official direction for the future. For months, rumors had circulated through royal circles. Questions had been raised, assumptions had been challenged. Yet, despite the growing anticipation, few were fully prepared for the moment when uncertainty finally gave way to action. When the decree was formally implemented, it instantly transformed the conversation surrounding Sandringham. What had once been the subject of private debate now became an established reality. The period of review was over. The period of waiting was over. A new chapter had officially begun. According to those familiar with the process, the decree represented far more than an administrative adjustment. It formalized a restructuring that had been developing quietly behind the scenes for months. Authority connected to the estate was reportedly transferred under a revised framework designed to reinforce accountability and long-term stewardship. The significance of this shift was impossible to ignore. Sandringham's future would no longer be guided by assumptions or informal expectations. Instead, it would operate within a structure intended to preserve continuity for generations to come. At the center of that transformation stood Princess Anne. Throughout the entire process, she had remained focused on one objective: protecting the institution she believed had been entrusted to her generation. With the decree now in effect, her role became stronger than ever. The recommendations she had championed were no longer proposals under consideration. They had become part of the estate's official direction. For supporters, it represented validation of her determination and years of dedication to royal service. For critics, it signaled the undeniable influence she now carried within the monarchy's most sensitive discussions. Across palace networks, adaptation began almost immediately. Officials responsible for implementing the changes reportedly moved quickly to align procedures with the new framework. Administrative responsibilities evolved, reporting systems adjusted, oversight mechanisms expanded. While many of these developments remained largely invisible to the public, their cumulative impact was substantial. The estate was entering a new phase, one shaped by structure rather than uncertainty, and by clarity rather than speculation. Reactions from different royal circles were swift and often emotional. Some viewed the decree as a necessary safeguard, arguing that it reinforced principles that had guided the monarchy for generations. Others reportedly struggled to accept the implications. For those whose expectations had been built around previous assumptions, the adjustment was particularly difficult. The future they envisioned had changed. Opportunities they once believed secure suddenly appeared less certain. In that contrast between expectation and reality, the human cost of the decision became increasingly apparent. Yet among many observers, one interpretation continued to gain strength. They saw the decree as a symbolic victory for continuity, responsibility, and institutional stability. It reflected a belief that stewardship should outweigh personal influence and that preservation should take precedence over short-term interests. Whether one agreed with the decision or not, its message was unmistakable. The future of Sandringham would be guided by principles intended to outlast individual ambitions. As news of the decree spread, the atmosphere that had once been dominated by tension gradually began to change. Questions that had fueled months of speculation finally received answers. The uncertainty that had divided factions started giving way to acceptance. Yet, beneath that emerging sense of resolution lingered another realization, one even more significant than the decree itself. Because while Sandringham had become the focal point of the conflict, the lessons emerging from the battle were never limited to a single estate. The decision had exposed deeper questions about power, responsibility, and the future direction of the monarchy itself. Yet the true significance of the decree extended far beyond Sandringham itself. In the end, this was never simply about property, influence, or royal politics. It was about who would be trusted to protect a legacy stretching back generations and whether duty would prevail over personal ambition. As the dust finally began to settle, the true meaning of everything that had unfolded became impossible to ignore. For months, attention focused on reviews, consultations, authority structures, and shifting alliances. Yet, beneath every discussion was a far more important question. Who would be entrusted with protecting one of the monarchy's most cherished traditions when competing interests threatened to pull it in different directions? The answer that gradually emerged was not based on popularity, status, or personal relationships. It was based on something far older and far more enduring: duty. Throughout the entire saga, Princess Anne had remained remarkably consistent. While others debated possibilities, she focused on responsibilities. While speculation spread through royal circles, she concentrated on preserving what she believed future generations deserved to inherit. Her approach was neither dramatic nor theatrical. It was steady, disciplined, and unwavering. And in the end, that determination transformed her from a participant in the story into one of its defining figures. To many observers, Anne emerged not merely as a senior royal, but as a guardian of tradition during a period of uncertainty. The future of Sandringham now appeared anchored within a framework designed to prioritize stewardship over expectation. That distinction mattered. It signaled that the estate's significance would continue to be measured not by who hoped to benefit from it, but by who could best safeguard its legacy. For supporters of the reforms, this represented a victory for continuity. For critics, it marked the end of assumptions that had survived for years. Either way, the outcome reflected a broader shift taking place inside the monarchy itself. What made this moment especially significant was the message it sent beyond Sandringham's gates. The events surrounding the estate became a powerful reminder that royal institutions survive because each generation accepts the responsibility of protecting them. Titles may change, circumstances may evolve, personal relationships may become complicated, yet the principle of service remains constant. That lesson echoed throughout every stage of the conflict and ultimately became its most enduring theme. Public perception of Princess Anne reportedly grew even stronger as details of the process became more widely discussed. Many saw her actions as evidence of the qualities that had defined her entire life: discipline, loyalty, resilience, and an unwavering commitment to duty. In a period often dominated by headlines about division and controversy, Anne's reputation for reliability appeared more valuable than ever. The contrast was striking. While uncertainty created anxiety around her, consistency became her greatest strength. At the same time, the power dynamics within royal circles had been permanently altered. The assumptions that once shaped expectations no longer carried the same certainty. The review, the consultations, and the decree had collectively reshaped the conversation about authority and stewardship. Future generations would likely look back on this period as a turning point, not because of a single decision, but because of what that decision represented. It demonstrated that protecting legacy sometimes requires difficult choices and uncomfortable realities. And perhaps that is why this story resonated so deeply. Beneath the discussions of influence and access was a timeless struggle between responsibility and ambition, between preservation and expectation, between personal interests and institutional duty. In that struggle, one principle ultimately prevailed. The future would belong not to those who assumed it was theirs, but to those willing to earn the responsibility of protecting it. Because in the House of Windsor, power may change hands, but legacy belongs to those willing to defend it. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.